Hello and welcome back to Jenna Gets Creative. I was contacted by somebody at Parkoo to review these new dual brush tip alcohol markers. Of course I said yes. So that's what we're doing today. We're going to unbox this, we're going to swatch them. I might do some comparisons to some of the other marker brands I have, and then we'll do a little illustration with them, see how they work out. So it says, quick drying, alcohol-based ink, waterproof, non-toxic, smear-proof, fade resistant. Fade resistant is interesting. Typically, alcohol ink is not light fast, but it's nice to know that this is at least resistant. Hopefully these don't fade as fast as the Spectra AD markers do. Here we've got the caps. They have numbers and color names like most brands would. I already looked at these color names just in the package when I got this out of the mailbox, and I noticed that some of the color names are in English and some of them are not. So like we've got your typical black, we've got baby blue, ultramarine, all that's fine. And then we have brun, and we have Canaria yellow with no W. Yet yellow green has a W. So yeah, it's a mix of English and not English. Brun is French, but could be other languages. I'm not sure what Canaria is, what language that is. Obviously it's meant to be canary yellow. And this looks like an interesting earthy nature sketching kind of palette. It's certainly not the most complete basic colors palette, but it would be good for sketching nature type stuff. So here on the marked end, on the gray stripe, we have the brush nib. And on the other end we have the broad or chisel nib. Pretty standard right there. Nice, fairly simple round barrels. The stops on the caps do pretty well. Similar complaint to the Ohuhu ones. The color's not labeled on the barrel anywhere, so if you were to take both caps off and you had two similar colors, you might not get the caps back on the same ones. So like this is probably fine, but I don't know, maybe how similar do these look? Actually, these two. Okay, I opened the wrong ends, but you get my point. You could easily mix up the caps and never have the correct color again if you took both caps off multiple markers for some reason. I don't think most people would do that. You don't want to dry out your markers prematurely. For comparison, these are about the same size as an Ohuhu marker. Now I'm curious and I want to pull one out to see if it's double-ended like the Ohuhu ones are. Hold on a sec. Let me grab some pliers. Okay, I'm going to demonstrate pulling out the yellow one because if I can get it out, I actually do want to switch this one. It's starting to get kind of fuzzy. That's juicy. So on an Ohuhu brush nib, it is the exact same nib on either side. They are reversible. You can just switch them around once it starts to get fuzzy. Let's see if the Parkoo nibs are the same. Alright, I wiped off my pliers, but just to limit contamination, I will also try a yellow one. They are! Okay, so these are the same as Ohuhu's brush nibs. They are double-ended brush nibs, which is great. That means your nib won't run out, won't fray out too fast. You can turn around and use it again. And that also means if you can figure out which line of inks these are and find refills, you could refill them and make these markers last a long time. There really are only like 5 or 6 different sets of alcohol inks out there in the world among these more budget brands. So if you can figure out which one it is, I can guarantee you can find a way to get refill inks. So let's go ahead and do a little test. Rod, chisel, whatever you want to call it. And the brush. Very nice. Yes, it feels exactly like the Ohuhu brush nib. So obviously that is black S. So there are the swatches, and once again, I'm going to sound like a broken record. Nice set for nature type sketches. Not a huge variety in terms of tone. These are all fairly saturated colors. Pale cherry pink is a little more on the pale side. Canaria yellow, yellow green, those are paler. This is a fairly dark brown. That's a fairly average, like a Nile green. The marigold, the rouge orange, the purples and the blues, those are very saturated colors. So you're certainly not going to do anything too pale with this. You're probably also not going to do portraits with this because that's very, very pink, and then this is very dark. You don't have a lot of skin tones here, but that's okay. It is a basic 12 set, and it's really not intended to be a skin tone set. So I would like to compare these to some of the other markers just to see if the colors match up. So hold on one sec. Alright, so quick interlude just to trot out the cheap brands that I am not actually going to be doing all my comparison to. Remember how I said you can figure out which set of inks a brand is using just by comparing to other brands and seeing if the names and numbers match up? So this is Touch 5, and this is Touch New. You can tell already by the names that they're probably the same, but as you can see, if we look at the caps, they match. They're identical. 81 Deep Violet. These two use the exact same ink set. This one's got some extra additions here because this is one of the ones I turned into a brush marker with a spare brush nib. You can check out that video if you want to. It's called Cheap to Copic. And then we've got this double line by Jenna. The purple ones are actually labeled P here, P81 Deep Violet, which happens to be the same. So again, these are probably using the same kind of ink. We have the Bianyo brush marker. Labeling looks kind of similar, doesn't it? These ones just have the number. You don't get a color name at all anywhere on here. Unless that's supposed to be the color name there, Morin. I don't know. These ones are a brush, and you know what? Now I'm curious about the nibs in these ones too. Nope, these ones have a tail. Those ones are not reversible. And this is the STA or STA. Same thing, just a number. Nothing there. Let's check out this nib. This is like the Bianyo one, just a tail. These ones are not reversible. I don't use these ones. I don't have them hanging out because they're really long. Look at those. I don't use these because they're cheap. Really cheap. This is cheap and stinky and doesn't blend well. First, let's comment on how well these swatches actually match the caps. Not a match on the rouge orange. I thought some of these blues looked pretty close though. Ultramarine's pretty close. Napoleon, not at all. Baby blue, eh. You get the idea when you pick up the cap for sure. Okay, we have a match on Ohuhu yellow-green. Parkoo's lettuce green is almost the same as Spectra ID's dark green. Parkoo's ultramarine is closest to Spectra ID's ultramarine. Parkoo's Napoleon blue is closest to Ohuhu's royal blue, but a bit darker. Parkoo's baby blue is somewhere between the Copic and Ohuhu robin's egg blue and the Ohuhu pastel blue. I thought for sure Parkoo's pale cherry pink was going to match Ohuhu's, but as you can see, Ohuhu's is a bit lighter, but it seems to be a perfect match for Winsor Newton's pale pink. Parkoo's Canaria yellow is similar to Spectra AD Canary yellow, a little bit more desaturated. Parkoo Marigold is a pretty good match for both Ohuhu's Marigold and Spectrum Noir's Amber. Parkoo Brun isn't a very close match to anything in my collection, but the closest would be either Winsor Newton Saddle Brown or Copic Copper. And I don't really have anything that matches Gentian Violet very well either. The closest is probably Deep Violet from the Touch New and Touch 5 markers. Out of the other things, it's a bit more on the reddy purple side than Ohuhu's Aubergine, and it's a little more desaturated than Copic's Violet, but it's pretty close to those two. Okay, let's attempt some blending. So if you can get similar enough colors involved in the blend, they do blend quite well. If you're working with a big value shift like the baby blue to ultramarine, you're more or less just depending on whichever marker you use last to eat the other color to dilute it with the alcohol. That's okay. It's a smaller set, so you're not going to have all of the in-between shades that you would use for a perfect gradient. But, you know, for a set to start with, it blends quite well. Okay, so I did some Angry Birds style characters. These aren't actually meant to be any of the actual characters in the game. I just picked some shapes and kind of did their angry little faces. And these do the job fairly well. As illustration markers, they filled in fairly evenly. bit of a light spot over here. That may be because this is coated paper. I did all the swatching on cardstock, but this is proper coated marker paper. It allows the ink to stay wet and sit on top a little bit longer, so sometimes you need to work it a little more than I did here, but overall, looks pretty good. So, final impressions, pros, cons. These do appear to be a fairly decent budget brand with a brush nib, which is really nice. In terms of color matching, they were most similar to Ohuhu and Spectra AD, which, as I always say, I believe is the same. I believe those are the same inks as the Blick Studio brush markers, the Spectra ADs. I'm not sure, I'm not convinced that these are the same inks as either of those because they didn't perfectly match either brand, but they are very close, and those are very good brands, so this therefore must be pretty good ink as well. The barrels are definitely quite similar to Ohuhu's. The plastic feels a bit harder, a bit more brittle, kind of like the Spectrum Noir markers. The color chips on the ends, they're not exact matches, but they're fairly close. Like, look at these greens here on this guy. The brush nibs are exactly the same as Ohuhu's double-ended brush nibs. You can turn them around and get more use out of them. And once again, as with any of these markers, if you can figure out which brand, which line these inks are, then you can get refills and keep using them. If you can't, you can match the closest ones in other brands and refill them as well. So, for example, here, that lettuce green was very, very close to Spectra AD's dark green, and as I have always suspected, this is the same as the Blick Studio markers. Blick Studio sells refills, so you could buy a refill of Blick Studio dark green, put it in your Parkoo lettuce green, and you really wouldn't see much of a difference. Cons? This seems to be the only set in the brush nib so far. I will link to it in the description box down below. I know they offer more colors in the fine nib, the bullet nib, but like, I don't know, they're probably just getting started with these ones. Maybe there will be more colors in the future. It's a good nature drawing set. It's probably okay for animals, not the best for animals. It's certainly not a portrait set. It certainly doesn't have a lot of variety in tones and values. And it also is not a primary set because there's no true red. This is a very orange red. But you could get away with it. You could get away with calling that a red. You could also mix in some of the other colors to darken it up. If I were to add colors to this, I would actually start by adding some grays, just so you could layer those and get more of a variety into them. But I would like to see a primary red. I would like to see some skin tones added in. I would like to see some different browns. Working with them, they felt just like any other alcohol marker I've worked with. They were quite smooth, they were quite juicy, and they play well with all of my other supplies that I would normally use with markers. So, if these are available on the version of Amazon that you shop on, or any other site that Parkoo may sell on, I definitely think they are worth it. I will be sure to have the prices in the description when I link them, and I'll work that out as a price per marker. I may remember to put that on screen, no promises. But I do believe this is a fairly cheap set. So, if you've been curious about them, or if you've tried the bullet nib Parkoos and not the brush nib and you're curious about them, yeah, they're definitely worth getting. They're worth giving a shot. Thank you so much, Parkoo, for sending them. They're great. I do like them. I do recommend them. I wish the brush markers were currently available on Amazon Canada. They weren't when they contacted me. Maybe they are now. Maybe I'll have a link to that in the description. Anyway, I'm rambling. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. I will see you on Friday with June's Colors of the Month.